Hey, everybody, it's Dave here and Darren over there. We're your two old bloggers. Been talking about the Minnesota Vikings publicly for over 2 decades apiece. Basically, since the internet went public back in the late 90s. Yes, it's been that long. And we love it. That's why we do it. Today, we have 3 themes as usual. First one's going to be, how effective will Alexander Mattison be? It's a good question. I think he will be. I don't know about Darren, though. We'll find out. Second one, we're looking at what is the future of Ezra Cleveland. As all of you know, Ezra is one of my boys. I love the big round bellies, and I loved when we drafted Ezra. So we're going to take a sort of an in-depth look at where he might place after this season, where he places now, where he might place after this season, so that we can figure out where and how much. And then the third theme, we're looking at defensive redemption. Can this defense be redeemed? Can it redeem itself? I used the word 3 times there. Will it get better under Brian Flores? We're going to find out next on Two Old Bloggers. Vikings First and SKOL presents This Week in Vikings Land with Darren and Dave, your 2 old bloggers. Hey everybody, it's Dave here again, Darren over there again, and today is a special day. I don't know if you saw it, but the lovely and beautiful Miss Mary posted it. Today is Darren's birthday. Happy birthday, buddy. How you doing today?
54 years young, Dave. Just great. And thanks, Mary, for posting that. It's always I appreciate people reminding me how old I'm getting.
Well, I want to welcome everybody that's here today. Raymond, Mr. Bob Swede, of course, the lovely and beautiful Miss Mary. Yogi, good to see you there, buddy. After last night, long time no see. It's great to join you on your show. Dr. Proto, who else am I missing? Travis, good to have you, buddy. And am I missing anybody else? There's Jonathan. I always love when Jonathan comes on. Of course, Davey Chains is here with us. He always supports us, and we appreciate that, Davey, so very much. And we welcome you to today's show. And if I missed Raymond, I'm sorry. Raymond, you're there too. Talking about being too hot. It's 40 degrees Celsius here down here, Darren. I know it's probably cooler up there.
Only 8, 19, or 20. Yesterday was 27, though, and everybody was like, man, it's so hot here. But all relative. Like, you'd be killed for 27 now.
I would love it. I would love it.
It's just what you're used to, right? We're not really used to. If it gets to like 30 Celsius here, it's really hot. 40 Celsius, wow. I don't even remember what that would feel like.
Hey, that's why we greatly appreciate the individuals that built air conditioning. It's a godsend. All right, today's show, we're talking Vikings 2023, Mattison's breakout, Cleveland's fate, and the defensive redemption. I love that word. You were the one that used that word originally, and I love it. So let's get going with theme 1. Alexander Mattison, is he going to be effective?
It's one of the questions we are all asking ourselves, Dave. And also thanks everybody who's given me the birthday wishes below. Appreciate it. Anyway, we'll ignore what Dr. Proto just said there. But yeah, the Alexander Mattison. I don't know if some people may have remembered, it was back in maybe April, we got dug into, started going into positional units for the Vikings and kind of looking at a crystal ball. Who would we keep? Who wouldn't we keep? And when I did the running backs thing, I was pretty convinced, well, maybe not 100% convinced, but my feeling was that the Vikings would find a way to keep Dalvin Cook at a reduced price. They let go Alexander Mattison, and Mattison wasn't going to be interested in coming back anyway because he wasn't going to get the play if they're going to keep the Cooker. Well, we get into free agency, and early in free agency, much to my surprise, Mattison re-signs with the Vikings for really not a whole lot of money.
Mhm.
And at that point, we're like, well, they can't be keeping Cooker if, there's no reason Mattison is going to stick around. So the Vikings, of course, we know that they tried to trade Dalvin Cook, weren't successful in doing so, and ended up having to release him and get nothing for him in June.
We think they botched it overall, but yes.
But they got some cap space that way, but not as much by delaying till June, but not as much as they would have got if they had traded him, and they would have got something back for him. Anyway, what's done is done. But at that point, then I'm thinking, okay, Mattison, they're keeping Mattison, but it's going to be a running back by committee, where you're going to have Mattison and then Ty Chandler. Madison's going to be 1A, Ty Chandler potentially Dwayne McBride, who they drafted, or maybe even, kick off returner extraordinaire Kene Kwangwu might get in there, and one or two of those guys would get 10 to 15 carries maybe per game, and Mattison would get the rest. Well, at OTAs and then at the mandatory minicamp, Kevin O'Connell, KOC, went out of his way to mention that Mattison is taking ownership as a 3-down back. So it looks like the running back by committee thing, there is not going to be a running back by committee thing, at least not now.
I'm not so sure with that. I think he calls him a 3-down back because he can play all 3 downs.
Right.
I don't know the split, and I wanted to look, yes, and I didn't. How many rushes per game are the Vikings currently taking? Last year, they did a 60-40 split on pass rush, but how many carries was that per game? It's over 20.
Good question. It was, I think it was around 21, 22 per game was the average.
Let me look it up real quick while you keep talking.
And Cook got 75% of the offensive carries or snaps, and Mattison got the other 25%, and Chandler and Kwangwu didn't get any except in mop-up duty and in the Chicago game. So that's how that shook out last year. It looks like, at least from what KOC is saying, like you're a bit skeptical, but it looks like Mattison might get, right now, he's in line to tote the rock 18 to 20 times a game if he's the number one guy. And so the question is Alexander Mattison a legit bona fide number one running back in the NFL? And it's a great question because we're not sure. I think that throughout his 4 years, his cumulative stats are 404 carries, 1,670 yards, and which works out to a 4.1 yards per carry average. The 4.1 yards per carry average, that's average, not great. And so those are the cumulative stats over his 4 seasons in the league. The things that we know about Mattison is that clearly he's not the explosive home run hitting threat that Dalvin Cook was and still is. His longest career rush run is 48 yards in the 4 years that he's played. Dalvin Cook, in his 6 seasons in Minnesota, 5 of those 6, he had a run of at least 68 yards or more every season. And the only season he didn't have one that long was in his rookie year, and he only played 4 games, and then he blew out his knee and he didn't play again. So Cook, big home run hitting threat. Alexander Mattison, not that type of running back. You're not going to see that on a consistent basis or at all, I think. And I think the other thing is that, not news to Vikings fans, but again, Mattison is not, he's not going to be the runner who can stick his foot in the ground and make a quick cut left to right and make a tackler miss when they think they've got him dead to rights, like Dalvin Cook could do. He's not going to accelerate by guys who've got angles on him and get that extra yard and pop out. And I've also seen criticisms, not something that I can comment on because of my X and O's deficiencies in football, but I've also seen criticisms that Mattison doesn't have the running back vision that Dalvin Cook has. He can't see those creases, opposite to where he's running to. He doesn't have that running back vision that elite running backs have. So whether you agree with that or not, I don't know. But those are some of the criticisms we have, and some of the things that I've seen from Mattison in the 4 years he's been a Viking. Now the pluses are that he's a real tough running from what I've seen. Not that Dalvin Cook wasn't either, but I've rarely seen Alexander Mattison get knocked back by a tackler. And I can't remember a time where I've seen Mattison go down on the first tackler takes him down, no problem at all. It's usually a struggle. So he's a guy that he's going to get you the tough yards.
I want to know who just hit the thumb down here a couple seconds ago. But when it comes to Mattison, believe it or not, he had a higher elusive rating by PFF standard than Cook did last year. Now, and I did look up how many rushes the Vikings had last year. They had a total of 405, which works out to just under 24 per game on that 60-40 split. Now, let's see if the Vikings mix in a little bit more and bring that number up or not. They can still be a pass-first team, but it's going to be interesting to see if they do that. And that also included a few of everybody else that ran it. So if he gets 20, that's a lot. And we're going to see. And I don't know if people noticed when I popped up that one slide a little bit earlier. Not that one. He has started, I think, 5 games, and they're up there.
Yep.
And during those 5 games, he averaged 145 total yards per game. Most people don't know that. Now, most of it was over 100 on the ground and then another 40 in the air. So, and I always remember when he did play those games, he took a while to lather up, as we'd say in the business. And hopefully he doesn't have to take that long with the KOC offense to lather up before he's that productive. If he's that productive, if he's doing 145 yards a game, we're golden. I don't see anything to worry about because I don't think Cook did that much last season at all. So,
no,
but we'll see. And that's only against 2 teams, Detroit and Seattle. But
now
5 games.
Now, the one thing I didn't mention is, and you bring this up reminds me, but I didn't talk about Mattison's pass catching ability. And my observations, and again, in the time that I've seen him in the 4 years, is that he's got good hands. He's good catching the ball out of the backfield. Again, not as dynamic as Cook was when he get the ball. He's probably not going to take like at the Colts game, take a swing pass and take it 70, 80 yards, or like we saw against Green Bay 2 years ago at Lambeau when he, was dipsy dude for 50 plus yards on a simple screen pass. But he's still, he's got good hands and he can generate good yardage on screen passes. I remember 2 years against Detroit, he took one into the end zone, 20, 30 yards and showed good, good was elusive on that one, made a couple of guys miss. So Alexander Mattison is solid in the running and the pass catching side of things. And like you said, he's done well when he has started last year. And in the 3 of the 4 years he's played, in the NFL, according to PFF again, he's had a grade of 70 or above, which is good. And Cook in his 6 years has had only done that 3 of his 6 seasons, according to PFF. So a little bit of comparison there. I'm not. I think that I'm not as. I think we know what Mattison is. I think you're right. Like last year, and his yards per carry average has been dragged down a bit by the last 2 years. In 2020 and 2019, his yards per carry average was 4.5 and 4.6 and 4.5 respectively in those years. So he's proven that, he can do better than just 4 yards or 3 yards in a cloud of dust type of thing too. I think that he's got enough track record. I've seen enough from Alexander Mattison that if he is going to be the featured number one running back, Dave, that I don't think that the Vikings running game is going to crater with him in there. Now, is he going to be as fun to watch as Dalvin Cook was? No. Is he going to be explosive and have that home run hitting ability like we talked about earlier, like Dalvin Cook? No. But
is
even
he
with
be
Dalvin
productive
Cook,
and efficient? That's the question.
yes. And exactly. And last year, as good as we, as great as Dalvin Cook is, we know last year the Vikings had a ton of inefficient runs, a ton of negative yardage runs with that Dalvin Cook had just himself. We led the league in those areas, I believe.
Mm-hmm.
And that leads into the other thing that's going to I think dictate how successful the Vikings running game is and how successful Alexander Mattison is the offensive line. Really last year, I think the last couple of years, we've really struggled run blocking and pass blocking too at times too. But last year, I just didn't see.
But
last year, I did not feel that we were an effective run blocking team. I didn't see, a whole lot of holes for Dalvin Cook to run through a lot of times. And, Alexander Mattison, he's going to need a crease or two. You need the five guys and the tight ends to create some running room for your running backs, or else it doesn't matter whether you're Adrian Peterson, Jim Brown, or whoever.
Well, see, now this is what shows the difference between PFF and Football Outsiders DVOA. Mm-hmm. As most everybody knows, Darren and I also like to look at the advanced stats. And when we do, we like to compare them and brings up questions as to why do they match what we see with our eyeballs, and as Drew would say, what we feel with our head and all that other stuff. And I don't know why Drew isn't here today, but I'm sure he'll watch it. Hey, Drew. But the whole idea of PFF grades the blockers individually, right? So they're going to grade Cleveland or Ingram or Darisaw or, Bradbury or O'Neal on each individual play and whether they win their block or not. And that's how they come up with their grades. And last year, believe it or not, PFF at the end of the season had the Vikings O-line ranked 13th. And that's sort of shocking. This year, going into the season, they have them at 15 because a couple teams moved up ahead of them, right? But they had them, their grades were Darisaw, 90.2, elite when it comes to run blocking. Ezra Cleveland, 80.3. That's not good. That's very good. Garrett Bradbury, 72.4. That's good. Ed Ingram, 63.4. Average-ish. But as we all know, Ed got better over the season as it went. And then Brian O'Neal at 82.4. That falls into that very good area. They had him there. And that's the individuals, right? And they total that all up, running in their, 8-ball of deal and go, hey, they're coming up. We rank them 13th overall, or we rank them as going into this season 15th overall. And you go, yeah, but Dave, why didn't Dalvin Cook get more yardage then if they were that good? Why we should have done better. Well, part of that is scheme and play calling. Part of that was Dalvin Cook. You got to put on. Now, this is where Football Outsiders looks at things differently. They're looking at the production. Yes. What is that line production-wise contributing to? And they're using those numbers more as a whole. And they had the Vikings as 25th. The offensive line is ranked 25th. That matched more of what we saw.
Yes.
Right, on production-wise. But I find it interesting that PFF thinks individually these guys are doing their job and they're doing it well, or well enough. But when you threw it all together, it was not well enough. It was down at 25. And I find that very, very interesting. And that, not only was it at 25, DVOA had our run game at 28th. So it had the line better than the run game itself. That's why when we talk, Why did we get rid of Cook, right? Cook has that explosive home run stuff. We all love that. But there were so many times that he was not getting that, and we understand why they wanted to go on for it. We think Alexander Mattison's going to be more efficient. He may not get that, 66-yard run, but if he's getting 3-4 yards at a whack, it's leaving third and short. The whole playbook's available, or second and short, third and short. And KOC can open that sucker up, and we can go. And that's what I'm betting on this season. I expect the line to be even better, and I expect the run game to be better because of that. But it's interesting to see the difference between PFF and Football Outsiders DVOA.
And less negative, inefficient runs by the Vikings as a whole, and by Alexander Mattison in particular, will make the running game more effective overall. Even if we're not getting that 81-yard run once every 5 games like we got with Dalvin Cook,
we're keeping drives alive and not going 3 and out.
Yes, and there was a lot of 3 and outs last year too. But still, that the feature back thing, Dave, only lasts as long as Alexander Mattison can hold on to it and prove that he's worthy of that. And it'll be interesting to see in training camp or in the preseason. I don't think we're going to see Mattison play very much. I think you're going to see a lot of Ty Chandler. You're going to see a lot of DeWayne McBride. If he's healthy, you're going to see a lot of Kene Kwangwu, and KOC and Wes Phillips are going to look and see what those 3 dudes can do with the playing time that they have, and whether and they will judge how much confidence they have in those guys to go to them more if Alexander Mattison and the Vikings running game is not doing what they expect them to be doing.
Or if they add that little extra sparkle, right?
And Ty Chandler can do that because he does have the speed to take it to the house, and take what could be a 5-yard run and make it 50-yard or 60-yard, or not quite Dalvin Cook but he's got that 4.3 something speed. So does Kene Kwangwu, but we aren't so sure about Kene Kwangwu's ability to read blocks and that sort of thing.
Yeah. Well, and it's going to be interesting because if I was coaching, I'd do, let's do efficiency. Boom, 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 boom. All right. We've moved 30 yards down the field. We're now midfield-ish. Let's change things up a bit. Hey, it's an obvious pass round play. Chandler, you're in. And have it set up to look like a pass, turn around, hand off to Chandler, ba-boom, right? And if he can do that little added sparkle, as I said, this offense, I still believe this offense can be top 5 and it can be special. But I think Mattison's going to be the workhorse in the fact that he's getting you that 3, 4, 5 yards at a whack and not going backwards. And we need that in the run game. That brings us to the end of theme 1. But before we go on to theme 2, there's some questions I want to answer. Davey, right before we started, asked me, Dave, what you sipping? Dave is sipping Devil's River bourbon. It's a small batch bourbon. It is distilled down in San Antonio, so it's got that Texas funk. And they pride themselves on iron-free water that comes out of limestone around here. We're in the hills country that runs all the way up and down this part of Texas. It's a wonderful, wonderful whiskey. I prefer the TX better, but this I would have no problem drinking this. It is very, very good. It's got the Texas.
You were having no problem drinking it.
No, not at all. And I had no problem last night either. But anyways, for everybody we missed welcoming, I know Dan popped in afterwards. I think there was a few other people. SKOL for life. Welcome to the show, Justin. Good to see you, my friend. We need to talk about podcasts. And let's see, what else have we got? I think that's about everybody. If I missed you, I apologize. Don't mean to. Christopher Dawson, welcome. Positive yards on run plays. Yes. Makes things work. You got that right. This was his post earlier. I agree completely. Dalvin never got us that. You're right, 100%. Welcome to the show. Devin Rinaldi over there on Facebook. Another good Italian boy. Anyways, it's on to theme 2. We'll talk about Ezra Cleveland's future.
Well, yes, Dave. We haven't even gotten into the 2023 season yet, so it might seem a little premature to talk about 2024. But the Vikings have, as all NFL teams do, the Vikings have a lot of impending free agents coming up, set to hit the market in 2024, and over the next.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, over the next, I think over a third of the roster are set to be free agents next year. But I'm over the next few weeks, we're going to take a look at here and there at different impending free agents and whether some of those players and whether the Vikings can and should re-sign them in 2024. And the first guy we're going to look at is Ezra Cleveland, starting left guard for the Vikings. And Cleveland is an interesting case because here's a guy, he's been the starting left guard for the Vikings for basically 2.5 of his 3 seasons in the NFL. And very modest cap hit right now, $3.3 million. He's got a base salary of $2.93 million, entering a contract year in his 4th season under his rookie deal. And of course, he's going to be looking to get a new deal and make much more money than he's making now in that deal. The Vikings have, and it was mentioned below by somebody, that the Vikings' offensive line as a whole, it's all made up of 1st or 2nd round picks, highly drafted guys. And at some point, when you draft guys that high, if they become what you hope they become, they're going to be in line for big extensions when their rookie comes up. And
we know that's going to happen with Christian Darrisaw, and it's already happened with Brian O'Neill.
Yes. And as is every position, positional unit on an NFL team, you cannot pay all pro money to all the guys on that unit. At some point, you usually can have one high caliber player that you pay big bucks to, but sometimes, depending on the unit, not 2, and definitely not 3 or 4. And so on the offensive line, you've got 5 guys that made up make up the offensive line, and the Vikings are going to have to make some decisions on who they keep and who they retain. And like you said, right now they're already investing a lot of scratch in Brian O'Neill. He's got a cap hit of almost $20 million. Christian Darrisaw will soon be joining him and making more than him in a year or two. And so with the question with Cleveland is, are the Vikings should they, and can the Vikings afford to sink more financial resources into him when his rookie contract comes up? And Cleveland is an interesting case because all over with the Vikings offensive line, I think most fans can agree that it's been a bit of an underwhelming unit for a number of years. And Cleveland has been underwhelming at times himself. Part of the reason is that, he came out as a tackle and he's learning. So maybe part of his struggles were that came out as a tackle. Vikings switched him to guard. So he's been learning a new position.
And opposite side guard to right guard at that time, no less.
And so, that could be an issue. But also coming into college, the scouting reports on Cleveland were very mobile, very athletic, doesn't quite have but he can't handle power. He doesn't have the strength. And so they move him inside where you're routinely facing guys who are 300 pounds or more and are big, strong dudes.
Yeah. And where strength especially is needed because you are leveraging massive human beings. And as a guard, you need to be stout and strong to control them in a small space. At tackle, you can use leverage and speed to deflect or, move somebody off their normal pass rushing trajectory, if you want to call it that, their route. You can't do that at guard because there is the space to do that. You have to physically battle them one-on-one, and that's tough.
It is, and I think that Cleveland has struggled with that. But last year, again, we're going to use PFF grades. You got him down there, but
Mhm.
last year he had 73.4 PF or 73.5 PFF grade in 2022, which is again pretty good. That's the best that he's done, and it showed. And I think that it showed
Mhm.
that Cleveland is starting to improve. This was, I think, his best season of his three as a
Mhm. You can
pro
see it going up,
NFL.
and the gray bar is this year. And if he keeps that same trajectory, that's where he's going to be. So we'll find out.
So that's encouraging. You're seeing a guy who's improving, consistently improving, and uh, as he enters a contract year, again, you have to take a look at that and decide what's he worth and is he worth keeping. I think with Cleveland, they again the resources. What are you going to put into it? Well, the good thing about Cleveland is that while he's improved, I think he hasn't gotten to like the elite kind of Steve Hutchinson type of level at guard where if he hits free agency, he would command humongous dollars that Kwesi Adofo-Mensah might not be willing to invest. So I think he's a guy that, depending on how 2023 goes, like if he really balls out in 2023, he might price himself out of the Vikings consideration. But I got the feeling that I don't see with Cleveland that he's a guy that's going to be a stud. I'd love to be proven wrong, particularly this year, but
I would too.
but I think but I think he's gonna be a guy who I think he's got more to he can get better, but he's gonna be a guy who's gonna be a solid, steady interior guy for you, not an elite all pro kind of guy who's going to command huge bucks to re-sign. So that's good for the Vikings. The other thing that's good about the Vikings is that according to Pro Football Focus, and I've seen this in a couple other areas, that between 2023 and 2025, they're set to have, as far as available cap space, they rank projected right now to be ninth in the NFL in available cap space, which is good. Now, yes, Christian Darrisaw extension, the Justin Jefferson extension, and depending on what they do with Kirk Cousins,
Mhm.
that will eat into that available cap space. But Kwesi Adofo-Mensah, with his contract maneuverings, with his shedding of vets, with the way the people that he's signed on in the past 2 years, he's set up the Vikings cap space to be much healthier than it has been previous years. So the Vikings will have cap space to sign a guy like Ezra Cleveland, who isn't way out of your price range. That is good. I think the other thing is that with Ezra Cleveland is that the Vikings have right now this year, depending on when Brian O'Neill gets back, you're going to have the same five starters that started last year. So good continuity. So he's got a good situation here where the offensive line, all these guys know how to play with each other. They're used to playing next to each other. They know what they do well. They know what they don't do well. I think they should be a good cohesive unit. So there's a good opportunity for success here for all of them, including Ezra Cleveland. I think that the Vikings as a whole, if ever Ezra Cleveland doesn't totally have a terrible year, I think when free agency comes, uh, they're going to value that cohesiveness. They're going to value the solid kind of play that an Ezra Cleveland brought them in 2022 and hopefully brings them in 2023. And I think that he's a player that Kwesi Adofo-Mensah is going to value highly because he's a good solid player, but he's not going to cost me a ton to retain. And
Mhm.
I think Kwesi's looking for value for money, and I think Ezra Cleveland can give you that. Not a super duper star, but a good solid guy who can make an offensive line, better by being part of
Right.
that
He's
unit.
not he's not a top 5 guard, but
No,
believe it or not, he's top 10.
and I guess the other good thing about it is with price points is that because he's a guard and not a tackle, guards don't tend to get the big, huge free agent contracts that a tackle would if they got to free agency. Like
Yep.
even guys like that in the offseason, I'm thinking a couple of examples. Ben Powers, Isaac Suomola, they signed free agent deals. Powers went to the Broncos. Suomola, I forget where he's gone, but they didn't sign like break the
He went to
bank
the Steelers.
deals. Yeah, they didn't sign particularly Sumola didn't sign break the bank deals, but they were pretty highly coveted guards in free agency. So when you look
And
at
as
their
you can
deals,
see there, Powers is at 13 million. And I say, as you can see there, a lot of people are going, Dave, it's too small. I can zoom in.
oh, look at that.
Um, Ben Powers, 13 million per year. That's that right hand column on average. whereas Samelo, $8 million. And if you look at their age, Ben Powers is 27. Samelo is 30. It takes a while to learn to play offensive line in the NFL. There's an adjustment from college, a big adjustment. And as I've always said, it takes 3 to 4 years. We've seen steady growth by Ezra. Ezra, as it sits right now, is, where's my chart? Here we go. Ezra is 10th overall in offensive grade. That's amazing. At 73.4. You can see he's strong at running. That's 79.7. That's hot. I mean, that is good. His problem is pass blocking. If he can figure out the pass blocking, he is going to be very, very good. And on there, you see at number 12 is Samola, however you pronounce that, who went to the Steelers. He was ranked 12th. By the way, Ben Powers at 30 years old, that's making that bigger paycheck, ranked 50th overall. So we can expect, I would expect, that Ezra Cleveland, even if he stayed steady this year, will be a $10 million guard. The only thing that a team will help with the negotiation is his pass blocking. But there are a few teams out there that run first. I can think of Atlanta being one of them.
Mm-hmm.
But there's a few. I think the Titans maybe too. But it's all going to be up to this guy. Well, Ezra himself and this guy.
Well, yeah, it's up to Ezra, because if he gets notoriety and has an all-pro year and everybody's talking about how great he's playing at left guard, his price tag is going to go way, way up. And then it might get too much for the Vikings when they have to consider, what are we going to pay Justin Jefferson? What are we going to have to pay TJ Hawkinson? What are we going to have to pay so-and-so, Christian Darrisaw? But assuming that he has a year similar to last year, and that would be fine with me. I'm happy if it's better. But, I think that his price tag is going to be much more reasonable and doable for the Vikings, with the cap going up and the fact that they've got more cap space than they've had in recent years to spend. And I think also the Vikings have to look at, again, valuing what you have, instead of, if you let Ezra Cleveland go, you've got to find a replacement for him. The Vikings roster right now, I'm not currently seeing who's the guy who's going to go in there and give you a level of play similar to what Ezra Cleveland gave you last year. Right now. So if you don't have it on the roster, you've got to go get it, which means you've got to go to free agency, which is going to cost you maybe more or just as much or more as retaining Cleveland, or you got to draft his replacement. Now, the Vikings, in my mind, the next two drafts if the Vikings next two drafts, they have a defense. They've got to target that, I believe, and they got to spend high early premium draft picks on impact defensive players, not your interior guards. If you already have an interior guard who can get the job done and do it well, which Ezra Cleveland looks like he can do. So I think that's another thing that Kwesi Adofo-Mensah is going to look at, and he's going to say, hey, I don't want to draft Ezra Cleveland's replacement if I can keep Ezra Cleveland at a reasonable price.
Ezra Cleveland and then take his draft pick and go pick another defender.
Because I need to get an edge rusher. I need to get and I need an outside edge rushing linebacker. I need a defensive end who can do something. I need an inside linebacker who can replace Jordan Hicks. Maybe I need another cornerback. I need a safety to replace Harrison Smith. There's a lot of things that you might need on defense. I think you're going to need. I don't think, if you can manage it, and if Ezra Cleveland can play at the level he played last year, I don't think you want to be replacing him. I think you got to look at re-signing him if it's a price figure that you're comfortable with. And that's why I think that the Vikings will make a strong push and will end up re-signing Ezra Cleveland at the end of the season, provided that he plays at a level that they feel is acceptable and makes the offensive line.
That it doesn't decline, and I expect improvement. Yes. Now, if he goes ball to walls and becomes a Pro Bowl left guard, then it might get expensive. I'd still be for keeping him, but it could get expensive.
Yes.
Mm-hmm. No, I'm all for it. Hey, I want to welcome some folks, new folks that come in, part of the Purple Gang, SKOL Mafia, and Rap. I saw you in there. Welcome, welcome, welcome to the show that never ends. We're about ready to go on to theme 3. And here we go. Redemption.
There's a lot of it required for the Vikings defense, for sure.
They were not good last season.
Not good the year before either, or the year before that. Haven't really had a good defense since 2019, but Vikings fans know that. They're well aware of they're all well aware that of the gobs of yards and points that the Vikings gave up last year. 28th overall in points given up, 31st overall in yardage given up. And the Vikings defense may have been almost single-handedly responsible for making Daniel Jones a wealthy young man with their performance and the way they let him pick us apart in the NFC wildcard game last year.
Do you think he sent them a thank you card?
He better have. He better, when Ed Donatel got fired, he better have sent Donatel like roses, his favorite liquor, whatever. Because, man, I did not expect Daniel Jones to get the contract he did. Well, he's a quarterback, so he's going to get paid, but I didn't think the Giants were going to
be the
one that did that, and they did, and good on him. And but I hope he sent like Donatel like a $10,000 check as well or something, because Ed Donatel made him a lot of money.
Yes,
but anyway,
Donatel's calling. Where's my commission?
Yes. Hey, is there an opening on the defensive staff of the Giants? I might be able to get onto. But anyway, all jokes aside, for the Vikings, for the Vikings, if they're going to repeat as NFC North champions, if they're going to avoid being a one and done NFC wildcard team, get back to the playoffs, the defense, I think, has got to be at least somewhere in the middle of the pack
at least
next season. But how are they going to do that? If you look at the way the offseason and the roster and the way it was constructed, like, I don't know. Like, yes, we signed Marcus Davenport, but we let go one of our better players, Patrick Peterson. Now, I'm okay with that gamble because of Peterson's age, but the Vikings, because of their salary cap situation, because of needs ahead on all sides of the of the offense, defense, whatever, they just didn't have the coin to really go into free agency and spend a whole bunch of money to bring in potential impact players on the defensive side of things. So you look at their roster, you're looking at it and you're going like, how can this team be better? I'm not really seeing like where the talent infusion is coming from. You've got a bunch of unproven guys in the secondary outside of Byron Murphy. You've got linebackers. You got rid of Zadarius. You traded away Zadarius Smith. So who's going to go in for him? Marcus Davenport. The defensive line is the defensive line. Where. Sure, the main reason for optimism, I think, with the Vikings having a better defense is Brian Flores was hired as your defensive coordinator. And we were hoping that Flores, with a very aggressive, blitz-heavy scheme, is going to make the Vikings defense harder to figure out for opposing offenses and harder to play against for opposing offenses. Whereas last year, they knew what we were going to do better than I think the defense did.
Right. And I think him using who's best for the situation is going to be a good thing, right? Say Metellus will come down into the nickel and they'll keep Murphy on the outside because that's best dictated by the wide receivers they're trying to defend. The next game, it might be that Murphy moves in on the inside and we have Evans come in on the outside. It's all going to be, that's how he plays. It's how he coaches and how he schemes up is I'm going to put the best out there for the particular against that particular team and against situations. And I think That's going to be confusing for the quarterbacks because they're not going to be, hey, I didn't see that last week on the tape. Well, they're going to do that. And I think it's a good deal. And I think Flores hopefully is the way to defensive redemption through, into this season.
Having said that, still, Dave, players are the ones that are making plays. Yes, the defensive coaches put you in position to make those plays, but the players got to make plays, and you got to have good players, impact players to make those plays. And I don't see a lot of that on the Vikings defense right now. Danielle Hunter, yeah, for sure, if he's on the team, But you think of San Francisco, hey, Joey Bosa obviously comes up. Eric Armstead, Fred Warner. You can mention the 3 or 4 other names. So when you think about the Vikings, it's Danielle Hunter and probably nobody else. So Flores is there. That's, I think, a good hire. But I think that there are a few things that, in order for the Vikings to take that jump and that leap to get to at least middle of the pack, there's a few things that the coaches are going to have to figure out, and the players are going to have to figure out that are going to have to fall on our side and work out for that to happen. And I think the one of the first ones is that you've got Danielle Hunter up there. We're still not sure, assuming that he's on the Vikings in 2023, and that's a big assumption right now. But assuming he is, one thing that the Vikings have got to figure out is they've got to. Yes, he is. The Vikings, somebody on the Vikings has to emerge as the other pass rushing threat besides Danielle Hunter, somebody that the defenses have to account for on a consistent basis. Last year, Zadarius Smith played really well the first 8 games of the year and was a terror. But at that point, Danielle Hunter was pretty quiet. And then
Danielle
second
Hunter
half
was
of the year,
that new system.
Yeah. And second half of the year, it switched. Zadarius Smith was
got a boo-boo on his knee, bruised knee, and then Danielle stepped up.
But it seemed like opposing offenses really only had to account for one of those guys and devote a lot of attention, had to worry about one of those guys for half the year, not for both of them for the whole year. So that's where, this year, Marcus Davenport, you had him up earlier, but he's been signed. We think he's going to be the guy who's opposite of Danielle Hunter if he plays with the team on the edge. Like Davenport has to, either he has to be the guy that emerges as the number 2 pass rushing threat, or it's DJ Wanham or Patrick Jones. One of those 3 have to step it up and become a guy that opposing offenses have to account for and have to devote blockers to and scheme for. So if they don't, then if Hunter is on the team, then it's only going to be Hunter they're going to have to worry about on pass rushing situations. And I think that's really going to curtail what the production of Hunter and the whole production of the pass rush in general. You can't have Hunter and just a whole bunch of other guys contributing very little.
Right. And you want the other guys contributing a lot. Yes. Double team Hunter. Go right ahead. But make sure Davenport takes advantage of that and gets his numbers. Now, Davenport's on again, off again. His history is great year, then he gets injured, bad year, great year, injured, bad year, great year. He's on a cycle where this year is supposed to be his great year. We'll see. But if Jones or Wanham can step up as well, all that helps. And then you can move, because we talked about it when they signed Davenport, you can move Davenport into the 5 technique and keep one of these guys. Then you got 3 pass rushers on the line, considering whoever's at nose tackle is technically not a pass rusher. It's not going to be Tonga. Tonga is wonderful there, and it's not going to be Phillips. Phillips is wonderful there, but you're not going to be, those guys aren't pass rushing specialists.
No.
You're not expecting a lot. You may get a couple, 2 or 3, which would be nice, but you're not going to get a whole ton. As long as they hold the line there and maybe push it back, that would be sweet. You want your pass rushers, whether it's that 1-5 technique and both your edge rushers, if they can start knocking it out, you can get over 50 sacks and a whole ton of pressures. Pressure's key. But these guys got to step up. The question is, will they? And that's all comes down to, Flores and his defensive line coach and how they implement that. And I'm hoping that this season we're going to see a difference than happened last year with Ed Donashell.
Oh, the old Donashell joke.
Mm-hmm.
So somebody emerging other than Daniil Hunter, assuming he's on the team as a pass rushing threat, that I think that's big for the Vikings defense. I think the second thing that I really am going to be, I think is important, is a slot corner. Now, last year, Shannon Sullivan was our guy. He was terrible at it. 34th out of 44 players who played in the slot. He was 34th out of ranked 34th out of 44 players who played sometime in the slot. And as far as the yardage he gave up per play, I think that he wasn't retained, rightly so. But the question is, who are the Vikings still? It's not clear to me who is replacing him in that role. There's been some talk that Josh Metellus, a safety, will play in the slot in some cases. I've heard that maybe Mekhi Blackman, the rookie, will be playing slot. He played slot quite a bit at college. Or is it going to be Byron Murphy, who we think should be the outside guy, but he's got a lot of experience in the slot? Either of those, whoever it is, the main guy, or if it's a mishmash of all three, the slot corner has to be effective last year, because when Shannon Sullivan was playing last year and Mackenzie Alexander the year before, we were really weak at slot corner. Teams could always know we'll attack the nickel guy, the slot corner, and we can get a free completion and keep the chains moving down just by targeting those guys. Doesn't matter how good Patrick Peterson is playing on the outside, or Cam Dantzler or Duke Shelley. We don't even have to target those guys because we can brutalize the Viking slot corner. And if we don't get improvement there, I don't think it's going to, again, if you don't get improvement there, teams are going to always have one spot that they consistently target and keep the chains moving and keep the first downs coming. So I think slot corner, that's got to be better this year for the Vikings.
Without a doubt, because the defensive backfield is sort of like a weak link system. The offense is going to attack the weak link, right?
Yes.
You can have shutdown guys on the outside, but if your slot guy is giving up catches every single time you throw that way, slot guys won't get any balls. We talk about cornerbacks in the past, whether it be Xavier Rhodes or whoever it was, they go, hey, I'm better than that. Patrick Peterson last year, I'm better than that. They only threw to me twice that game. Why? Because they were thrown to the weaker coverage over on the other side. They knew I could defend it, so they threw over there. And that's something that Flores has got to figure out, who's the best in that position to do that per game, per situation, and put them there. And it's going to be interesting to see how that works out, because it's not going to be what we're used to. I don't think it's going to be what we're used to, definitely under Donashell, but I think even with Zimmer, and Zimmer's great defenses, he had good players at certain positions and they schemed up to where it made it work. Except for the last 2 years when he got his defense gutted. It's going to be interesting to see how Flores does it and who does actually play slot. Is it going to be a fixed person, or is it going to change game to game, play to play, drive to drive? I can't wait to find out.
True. And there's something to be said for having somebody play that position all the time and consistently, and they get used to playing a lot and know how things work. But yeah, maybe it's a better idea if you don't have a true legit, or you're not true legit slot corner that you're totally comfortable with, that you mix and match and base it on the opponent that you're playing, which seems to be what Flores has indicated he would do all over the defense. Is that you got to be multiple, and we will be using multiple guys in multiple roles doing multiple things.
Right. Do you want a safety in the slot that might help with, say, tight ends, bigger wide receivers, or a corner who might help with a speedier guy? Say they got a third wide receiver that's fast. The safety may work better in one situation, whereas the corner may work better in the other. That's what I'm talking about. Make it happen. Make it so.
Make it happen. So talk two things so far. A pass rusher that emerges as a guy who's a legitimate threat opposite of Daniil Hunter, assuming he's on the team, and get the slot corner thing fixed out. I think a third thing that I'm watching for is at that I think the Vikings, something positive has to happen there, is at inside linebacker, and it's with Brian Asamoah. We're pretty sure that he is going to be given the starting job, that Eric Kendrick's starting job, opposite of vet Jordan Hicks. And I'm very excited to see that, because Brian Asamoah was a heat-seeking missile at Oklahoma as a college player, a guy who was a rangy sideline to sideline guy, created all kinds of havoc for defenses with his speed, his ability to do different things, coverage, blitz, you name it, he could do it. That's what he did at college. The question is, can he be that player at the NFL level? Because there is some doubts with his size. He doesn't have the typical inside linebacker size. But if he is the guy who's going to start opposite of Eric Kendricks, Brian Asamoah has got to be that impact player, because if he isn't, then the Vikings have a problem at both inside linebacker positions, because Jordan Hicks last year wasn't that great, in my opinion. And at his age, he's 31, I believe. I'm not really very optimistic that he can really rebound and be a better version of himself at this age. So we need Brian Asamoah to be that guy creating havoc, to be the rangy sideline to sideline guy who can do multiple things and create all kinds of uh, headaches for opposing offenses, like he was at Oklahoma. If you don't get that from him, again, you're going to have two big, I think, weak spots at the inside linebacker, and that's not going to be good, and that doesn't bode well for the Vikings having an improved defense in 2023. I'm optimistic that Brian Asamoah can be that player, but he played very little as a rookie, so we really don't know what he's got as a pro. I think we're going to find out at preseason. We're going to get to see him and see how Brian Flores is going to utilize him, I think. But he's a question mark right now, and he's a question mark that's got to turn into a positive answer.
Yes.
For the Vikings defense as a whole to take that leap forward that I think they need to take in order for the Vikings to become more than to be a playoff team and be more than a one and done playoff team in 2023.
Correct. And he's got to step up with pass coverage where Hicks does not. Hicks, I just looked up Hicks. Hicks is great. Hicks was great at run defense, 80.2 per PFF. But his coverage skills is what sucked. And that's where Brian Asamoah, he has the speed to do it. He's going to have to be able to not only cover the run, he's got to be that all-round linebacker like Kendricks used to be, where he can not only attack the run, but also cover on the pass. And it's going to be interesting to see, because, he was out part of last year and didn't play a whole lot, but when he did, it was promising. So I can't wait. And he's the presumed starter, so we should see it early. And hopefully
they have nobody that is an obvious person who could beat out Asamoah for the job. We added Troy Reeder, but if you look at his grades in his pro career, not very impressive. But so he's a backup. Troy Dye's a backup, and on it goes. William Kwenkwu the backup. A guy who we don't know a whole lot about, didn't have to get to play very much other than on special teams, and we don't know what his promise is. So I think, pretty important that Asamoah he's going to be the player that we,
yeah, because if they want to pull Hicks off, they can drop a safety in, right, to replace him, bring in another safety, because we're heavy on safeties, and guys that can play in the box, the hybrid role. They can bring the safety in, bring Hicks out during obvious passing downs, put an extra safety in there, they're fine. But the key is that he stays in and he can excel.
And there are I think there are several other things that you could look at that the Vikings have to improve on to be much better defense in this season than they were last season. I didn't even get into like tackling, which I think was poor last year by a number of players. But I think, but then individually, I think individual players and certain guys stepping up in certain roles, I think would be that we just mentioned would be very helpful for the Vikings in getting instead of being a bottom feeder defense, at least being league average defense. I think it'd be quite optimistic to think that they're going to be anything better than league average based on the talent that I see and how they played last year with the talent that is back from last
better
year.
than last year.
Oh, way better. Yeah. And you don't, and you can just imagine if you have league average defense and the offense is the top 5 offense we're kind of hoping for, what that could mean for the Vikings.
It's going to get us to the playoffs if that's the case, easily. So, and hopefully deep into it. Mateo, I want to agree with you. Let's be honest. If your name isn't Harrison Smith or Danielle Hunter, you don't trust them. That's the whole idea about this, is that Brian Flores has a whole bunch of young guys and guys with potential, right? Like Davenport, that he can make a name for himself, obviously go on to his next job. However, I hope he stays for 2 years, please. That he's got to mold. This defense is really, they talk about, well, the Vikings rebuilding or not rebuilding, competitive rebuild, blah, blah, blah. The defense is in full rebuild mode. It has been since prior to KOC, when Spielman started gutting everybody. And it's needed. Those guys were old and they're starting to age out. So we've got to give them time to develop. I think Flores is the best person that could possibly be to help develop those guys into stars, that so at the end of the season we can say, hey, it's not just Smith, it's not just Danielle, it's also Davenport, it's Asamoah, it's Evans, it's Murphy, it's Metellus, playing in this, it's Cam Bynum stepping up and cementing his role next to Smith. It's Lewis Seen coming in to replace Smith next year. Stuff like that. That's what we're looking at. We're in that transition period from good to great defenses under Zimmer and 17 and 18-ish time period to now we're rotating into the beginning of a new one. And it's that transition period that has us a little queasy, not sure what, to make of it. But we think
more than a little.
With this guy, it could be quite promising. And we're hoping that it is the case. For anybody I missed saying hello to, I see Matthew's on there. Mateo, I saw you posting. Great to have you back, my friend. Welcome to the show. But we're at the end. That's right. There is no more today. It is just that. We went over our 3 themes, talking about in the very beginning, Mattison stepping up as the number 1 running back. We talked about in the second theme how Ezra Cleveland's going to look, how he can make money for next year, and will he stay on the Vikings, and could we get a discount if he improves that much, as I hope he does, because I think he will be a good one. And there at the end, how the defense can redeem itself. So it's a good thing. Matthew, yep, you bring up all that wonderful dead money next year. Get it out of the way. I think that's their plan. I think we'll take the bullet, but we'll be in good shape. But we'll take the bullet. They're planning for it and get that stuff out of their way. If they extend Kirk, hopefully it's because he took us all the way. If not, bite that bullet and let's move on and continue. Have the defenses already started in that, changeover? The offense is mostly changed over. We're young across the offensive line. We're younger at our weapons. The only place we're not is QB, and that will be obviously the number 1 issue in next year's offseason if Kirk Cousins doesn't get us way, 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 way deep, if not all the way in the playoffs. So that's what it is.
On offense, Dave, I don't think the Vikings have an offensive starter who's over 27, other than Kirk Cousins. I hadn't thought about that till you brought it up. I think O'Neal is 27, maybe 28.
Maybe. Yeah, you're right.
But other than that,
they're young.
Other than that,
TJ Hawkinson's young. You know, JJ's obviously is. KJ is. All the wide receivers are. Your line is.
Madison's the youngest running back on the team, even though he's been on the team. This is his fifth year.
Exactly. So it's we're setting up pretty good. I look forward to it. And like I said, it's going to be a fun year. It's going to be a fun preseason. And that starts rookies report the 23rd. Vets, and along with the rookies, you get the quarterbacks, and along with the sixth and lame, they'll be there too. And I think the snappers, the centers. And then 25th, all the rest of the vets come. They report in, and everything gets going in earnest, I think, on the 26th, which would be fun to watch. In the meantime, we have coming up this week, July 12th, Netflix's Quarterback, where we all know that Kirk Cousins is one of the 3 featured quarterbacks. It's due to come out Wednesday, the 12th. I think the 12th is Wednesday. We're going to watch that and talk about it next Sunday. Darren, I hope you have Netflix.
I do.
Because I want to see the behind-the-scenes stuff. That should be fun. Tomorrow, we'll have The Real Forno Show. I'm sure Tyler will have something planned. He hasn't told me yet, but it should be fun. And we'll go with the normal, weekly schedule from there. And we're glad that everybody made it here today. We appreciate you coming. We love you guys. We think the Vikings community is the best in the freaking country. Best out of all the 32 NFL teams. And why would you want to be with anybody else? Any last words there, buddy?
Matthew was talking about, I think for defense, I just wanted to note that he talked about there's a lot of hoping and praying, and we didn't acquire a lot of talented, young, cheap players. And I do agree with some of that for sure. I think certainly there is a lot of hoping particularly on the secondary side of things right now. And, but I think, that acquiring cheap, young, talented players, if they're talented, they're not going to be cheap. So I think the only way you can do that is draft and develop. I think if you're acquiring young, talented players through free agency, you're going to pay through the nose most of the time to do that. Like how Chicago did with Tremaine Edmonds. Do you want that kind of a contract? I guess Chicago was okay because they had like $1 gazillion in cap space, but we did not have that. So there are some realities that you have to look at. But there certainly are a lot of question marks on the defense, and that's why. And I brought some of those up, and there's others too. Brian Flores is going to earn his money this year, Dave. If he gets this defense to like league average, the guy probably is a head coaching candidate for the following year.
I agree. I hope he doesn't. I want him 2 years. That way, once he leaves after 2 years, then we get the draft pick for him. So that's why I want him 2 years. And I want him 2 years influencing how the defense goes and then training KOC in that as well. So that's why I want 2 years minimum. Keep my fingers crossed that happens. But we'll see. We'll see. Yes, Mateo, I would have loved to have drafted, especially Winfield Jr. before. But hey, it happens. With that, what do we say?
We say SKOL Vikings, baby.
SKOL Vikings. Like, subscribe, and ring the bell. And rate us on your favorite podcast aggregator. Darren and Dave, thank you for watching this episode of Two Old Bloggers. We look forward to seeing you on every show on the new Vikings First and SKOL. You can find our podcasts as part of the Fans First Sports Network. Sports takes for the fan, from the fan. SKOL, everybody!